Hello everyone. Bonjour ni Shabidug. Makwa Pigamug Indigo. Nick Smith and Gimajii Gana Shimon. Makwa Du Dame, Miss Washpikag and Doomsbad, Ashon Gami, Saint Inda Nunga. English was in Daryeg. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Nick Smith and I am a case manager here for the American Indian Community Housing Organization, or ACO. Just as a reminder, we do have some refreshments and snacks and stuff right outside the door out there. And if you need to use the restroom, you go out to the right, left, and then right again, and it'll be on your right. You guys can remember that? Okay. Well, just a brief overview, I guess, so you guys know where you are. This is Trepanier Hall. We're connected here next to, our Gimajii Minnow Zeman, which is our permanent supportive housing project. ACO consists of many different things, such as Gimajii here, transitional housing, domestic violence shelter, and our Gateway Mobile project. So thank you all for coming, and hope you enjoy yourselves. I'm going to pass on the mic here.
Thank you so much. Can we have a round of applause for Nick? My name's Andrew, and I'm the director at the Duluth Art Institute, and this is the fourth in a series of 6 events exploring and investigating Duluth's visual identity. And I'm just curious, who has been to 4 of these, this being the 4th? Who's been to all 4? Who's been to 3? Awesome. 2. And this is the first for some people. Awesome. All right, so I will explain what's going to go on tonight. Some of you know how the evenings work, but we do also change things depending on what your feedback. So there's some things that were on your seat. One of these blue sheets is if you get bored of me talking, you do have to pay attention to all the other speakers, but while I'm talking, if you get bored, you can fill that out. The front is a question prompt. Throughout all of these series, we're doing a series of question prompts, and these are going to be exhibited at an exhibition that we have this spring to sort of sum up what we've been doing all year. And then on the back, there's space for feedback. So tell us, more grapes or, whatever you want to see happen. So fill those out and turn those in at the front desk at the end. There's also information about the Art Institute and the rest of the Design Duluth series. The next one is going to be March 24th at Vicray. And we do, because that space is much smaller, we will need RSVPs. So RSVP if you want to come to that one. It is free, like this one, but just space-wise. I do need to thank some fabulous organizations that made this possible. The Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation, and the Duluth News Tribune both made this event and our whole series possible, as well as members of the Duluth Art Institute. So some of you I know are members, but we do count on member support to do fabulous programming like this. And mostly I want to thank ICO for hosting this, for helping design it. Michelle and Ivy Vineo and Jonathan Thunder and the whole ICO team. And special thanks to our speakers this evening, to Nick Smith, Bruce White, Dr. Paulus, Michelle LeBeau, and Jake Vineo. And Jake provided that gorgeous music that you all came in on. So the whole series is about celebrating the excellence that we currently have in design in our community and bringing creative people together to talk to each other and make connections, which is why you're all sitting at tables together, and that sort of informs how we operate this. So I'm going to introduce the speakers. The speakers are going to talk. We'll have Q&A, and then I'm going to make you talk to each other. And we have little activities that you can do at the tables. And to encourage you all to stay and talk to each other and do those activities, there are some prizes afterwards. So, and there also will be a tour for those of you, the ICO extra special thanks to ICO, because everyone practically in this building came down with the flu this week. So this was put together on a very bare bones staff, and if you are brave enough to venture into the spaces, just don't touch everything or lick the walls. There'll be opportunities for tours as well. So the topic here, since we are at the American Indian Community Housing Organization, our topic is home. And how is Duluth home? How are we welcoming who lives in Duluth? How do we make it homey? How do we make it safe? You know, what is that concept of home? So Bruce White is going to be our first presenter, and he's going to present on a study that he did, the ethnographic study of indigenous contributions to the city of Duluth, that the city, which is like fresh off the press. And we have a few copies at the front for those who really want to read the full entire study because it's fabulous. And then Dr. Robert Paulus from the Duluth Indigenous Commission will add to Bruce's presentation, as well as introduce the current work being done at Gimajii. And Michelle LeBeau will talk about reclaiming the idea of space and how interior design plays into that piece. And then Jake Bynio will finish us up with a poem and some music. So, Bruce, where is Bruce? Bruce, hello! We're so fortunate to have Bruce. He's the director of Turnstone Historical Research. He's an award-winning historian and anthropologist with long experience in research and writing. He is the author of numerous books and articles, including We Are at Home, Pictures of the Ojibwe People, published by the Minnesota Historical Society Press, and his article, The Myth of the Forgotten Treaty, Traditions About the St. Peter's Treaty of 1837, is included in a new book, The State We're In. So can I have everyone join me in welcoming Bruce?
Thank you. I didn't realize I was going first. Go out there, go out there. Well, this is great. I just want to say right off the bat that this is the product of the Indigenous Commission, the Duluth Indigenous Commission, formerly known as the, what was it called, the American Indian Commission. And we have Carol DeVerney here, who's on the commission and was one of the people who inspired this project. I got a call in 2012 to come here and talk to people about doing a project on this. Well, the topic was not well defined, but one of the first things that people said was that Indigenous people in Duluth feel that they are invisible, that their history is not well known. They are mentioned on, well, I don't want to go into all the things that where Indian people are mentioned, like, you know, when it comes to roads, for example. Why can't we pay for repairing our roads? It's your fault. Things like that. Well, that's just, you know, you've all heard this. So, as a historian who works with communities, I worked with Mille Lacs Band and some Dakota communities. I was asked to work to put together a study, to do a study, basically, to think about what the issues were and sort of do a pilot study, and then as a result of that, do a bigger one. So we got some money from the Minnesota Historical Society Legacy Funds. We did a study in 2013, and then we got another grant to do this project, an ethnographic study of the city, indigenous contributions to the city of Duluth. So this involved doing some oral history, historical research, archaeological research, local history, all kinds of things that would shed some light on the history of the indigenous people in Duluth, but also would answer the question of why are indigenous people invisible today? And so there were a series of interviews with people. I think I never got to interview Carol, and I'm still going to call her up one day and I'm going to say, okay, now's the time. We're going to do that interview. Anyway, the time ran out. Once you do a study like this, you think at the end, oh yeah, this is how to do it. Now we can start. But it's the end. So you have to put it all together in the best form possible. And then can start the conversation with people about what more needs to be done. And, you know, there were many themes that seemed to recur, and one had to do with racism. Racism in the city of Duluth toward Native people. And it's a real sore spot, and I understand why. And, you know, maybe it comes out in the report, you can read it, and you can see what, you know, there's some quotes from people. I think that, you know, something that Ricky Defoe said I thought was so eloquent, and see if I can find it here. I'm gonna now juggle.
And there are, like I said, there are extra copies up at the front, and maybe I'll go grab them and put one at each table.
Okay, well, I'll just paraphrase it. I'll just try to channel Ricky Defoe. You all know Ricky Defoe, and he's a very eloquent speaker, and even if I read his words directly, I couldn't say it the way he could. But basically, he said about growing up in Duluth, he said, I was a boy with a French name living in a city with a French name, but I was not French. And then he goes on to talk about the difficulties of that. Why is Duluth named Duluth? Well, we talk about that in here. He spent, what, 2 weeks here? Why is this city called Duluth? You know, it would be much more accurate in terms of the historical naming of places to call it by the Ojibwe version of Fond du Lac. Because if you look at all the early maps, the name Fond du Lac appears along what we now call Canal Park. And, you know, and then the portage across Gimajii, the little portage, which is where the ship canal is. It's another name. You know, there are many more accurate names for Duluth, but you're stuck with it. So it's better to learn from that and figure out what it means and try to study it a little more. And another thing that came up in the interviews had to do with art, had to do with public art. And so that's really what I wanted to talk about today, was public art in Duluth. And why is it the way it is? You know, I don't know if you know the Medical Arts Building on Superior Street, which is not too far away. I don't know if anybody even realizes it, but if you look way up at the top, there are two faces in the corners of the building at the very top. They are the faces of Indian people, and yet they are so inaccessible. It's even hard to figure out how to take a picture of it. I was plotting all during the summer, thinking, how am I going to get a picture of that? Because you go in some of the offices in City Hall, and they have these really thick screens across the windows, so you try to take a picture through that. I was thinking, there must be a parking ramp somewhere where I could take a really long telephoto lens and I could photograph it. But it seemed to me this symbolizes the whole project. The presence of Indian people in Duluth is impossible to see and inaccessible. And so the purpose of this project is to say, let's figure out ways of solving that problem. And we talked about, there was one person, I guess I could tell you who it was. It was Henry Buffalo. He was the tribal attorney for Fond du Lac, and his family is from this area. He's descended from Chief Buffalo. The Chief Buffalo Reservation is a good part of the downtown of the city of Duluth today. The Chief Buffalo Reservation contains the city county government center and the Carter Hotel and all these places. Probably this building is in the middle of the Chief Buffalo Reservation, which was a reservation set aside in the Treaty of 1854, which Chief Buffalo was unable to benefit from, and none of his descendants have been able to benefit from it. And yet, it symbolizes the heritage of the city that is ignored. Where can you go to see the statue of Chief Buffalo? Why isn't it in City Hall, in the doorway? You know, it's just a minor thing. And, you know, there are native artists who could do that. Jeff Savage, for example, is an amazing sculptor whose work is featured at Lake Itasca, this amazing statue that he did representing what you'd have to call the mother of waters at Lake Itasca. He grew up in the city of Duluth. Where are his works? Nowhere in this city can you find a sample of Jeff Savage's work. So, you know, I just mentioned that in the report as something that should be addressed. But, you know, I guess is Carl Gabo here? Didn't he do a representation of, oh, there he is. All right, I didn't realize that. Yes. Chief Buffalo in front of is that the City Hall or one of the government buildings? Or is that Washington? Because Chief Buffalo went to Washington, D.C. in the early 1850s. Yeah, well, that's an image that should hang somewhere in the city. I mean, it's a part of the history that if people could have a way of, you know, it might be a cell phone app or something. They walk around the city and they say, "Oh yeah, you're now walking onto Chief Buffalo's reservation." It might be useful. Part of that heritage that is ignored and misunderstood. So then I thought about, you know, that's what's missing. What is here? What are the sculptures that address the public art? What is the public art that addresses the native heritage, the indigenous heritage of Duluth? Well, there's the woman in Canal Park what is she doing? I wish I had pictures of these. I didn't even get them in the report because time ran out. But if you walk down in Canal Park, there's this woman with her basket. She's winnowing wild rice. And my sister-in-law, Kate, tells me that one of her friends always thought she looked cold and used to bring her sweaters, put them on the statue. But she is a bit out of place. I mean, it's not a native sculptor who did it. Go to the University of Minnesota. There's this amazing circle representing the harvest moon. Again, not a native sculptor, and yet it supposedly addresses the native heritage of the city. Why aren't the native artists asked to do these public sculptures? It seems like a obvious thing. And so, you know, that's not the major point of the report, but it's something that I think is worth discussing. I think it was Henry Buffalo, as I said, who started me on this. He was in the city when the lake walk was put in, and he said that somebody brought up the idea, well, why not have something that addresses the story of Chief Buffalo along there? He thought, if any time was right to do that, it would have been then. And yet, have you walked along the lake walk? And what do you see? Along the upper part, it's the navigational history of the city. Then there's a little bit over along one of the streets, but in front of a parking lot, there's a carved wall that there's some voyageurs, and there's an Indian man or chief standing next to a voyageur. It's just, what story does it tell you? What's the story? How do we educate people if the public symbols of the city do not address the native heritage? How will people ever know? Why isn't it that, there's cities where they have fabulous sculptures and they're on the advertising for the city, and you think, oh, let's go there. Let's go to Bemidji and see Paul Bunyan. Now I guess there's a statue of the so-called chief Bemidji is going to be put up in Bemidji. But, what do we have here? Leif Erikson, the discoverer of North America. Why is Leif Erikson the discoverer of North America? They knew it was here already. All he did was, we don't even know where he went exactly. So Leif Erikson is up there with Chief Duluth, Chief Daniel Graysalon Sieur Duluth. Let's call him that, because it's as much don't get me started. Are you sorry you invited me yet? Until you throw me out, I will not have done my job. So, you're stuck with me for a while. Well, there's a lot more to talk about in this report besides public art, but it seems only fitting that public art should be the thing we discuss here. And it may be that I don't know all of you, but it may be that there are people here who can make a difference, who can make this happen, who can go to the city and say, where's the statue of Chief Buffalo? And then, of course, I know Jonathan Thunder, and he says, oh, they want some native art, and the first thing they want me to do is another chief. Oh, yeah, I guess that's what I'm doing. And I'm sorry, Jonathan, but it's more of an educational function. It's a way to create an identity. What is Duluth? What is the identity of Duluth? Is the identity of Duluth the ore boats? Is that all there is to Duluth? The city with a French name in which is symbolized by ore boats. That's Duluth. Well, I like to call Duluth the San Francisco of the North because of the cold winds that come off the lake, which are kind of like San Francisco. But, I think that the native heritage should be part of that identity. It should be addressed. It should be done through the artists who are indigenous, native. Somebody will say, what do they want to be called? Well, they want to be called Carl, Jeff, Wendy, Karen, Ivy. That's what they want to be called. And then they want to be called up on the phone and asked to do some work by people with money. There's money available to do this kind of thing. So, those of you with power, I'm not very good at recognizing people with power. I'm sure there are people with power in this room. I can't tell. Somebody can tell me later. Who are the people with power in that room? Well, you all have power. You all are residents of Duluth. I'm just a guy they brought in to do this study, and now I'm gonna leave, and it'll be up to you. So, I don't know. I'm probably going on too long, but are there any questions? Carol, do you have anything to say? Carol DeVerney.
I hope that in order to promote the indigenous Anishinaabe people and the Sioux that were here as well, that we don't come up against a lot of roadblocks, which we already are. It's like it takes there's a huge process we have to go through to even name a place. We found that out at our last meeting with the city. And I understand processes, that they're important, I mean, but I think it's gonna take a lot more, like what you're saying, Bruce. We need a lot of advocates, you know, saying, where is the signs, where are the statues, where's the artwork? And we have a lot of good Anishinaabe artists in this area that can make this happen. They just need to be asked, of course, and the funds need to be there. But just getting it past the city process is going to be a feat. Me, Rich.
John Kenneth Galbraith said that when it came to anything, money helps. And I think that's true of art as well.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Next, we have Dr. Robert Pallas. He can, I'm sure, add some to that. But Dr. Pallas is a professor emeritus at UMD. He also was part of the original commission before it was the Duluth Indigenous Committee, and he was a key member in founding Aiko and Gimajii. So I will turn it over to Robert.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right? And can you see me okay? I talked to one of my doctors the other day, and she suggested that if I'm going to move around, I should use this walker. So if you don't mind, I'll sit here. And if you can see and hear me okay, that'll be fine. The problem is, of course, that if you can't, then I'll be glad to stand up and lean on my machine. I was asked to do this tonight, and one of the questions I was asked was, when you were on the Duluth Indian Commission, why did you become interested in some of the things that needed to be changed, perhaps? Well, that was a relatively easy question, because of the fact that it became obvious to me, as a member of the commission, that for some reason, all kinds of walls had been built up in the community between races, between people inside of those races. All kinds of walls had been built up. And so I thought, you know what we need is an organization of some kind that is going to serve to break down those walls. And it seemed to me, now maybe if you looked at it back when I did, you would come up with a different answer. But it seemed to me that to break down those walls, you needed some kind of an organization that was going to pound away at those walls and break them down. And so, one of the things that I tried to get across to people was, what kind of an organization can do that? Is it an organization that meets regularly or annually or semi-annually or semi-daily or something, and talks about these things? No, that's not what it's about. You need people who are willing to stand up and say, want something changed, and we're going to change that. Not next week, not next month, not next year, but now. The walls need to be broken down now. So that was the start. Now, how do you go about getting people to do such a thing? Well, if you're like me, you start looking around to see who are the people who have power in the community. Who are the people who have something to say about what goes on? And it was interesting to me that one day, a fellow by the name of Herb Bergson, remember Herb Bergson? He was the mayor at one point. And he and I drove over to Wisconsin to talk to a group of Indians over there. And on our way back, I noticed that he was always looking at his watch. And I said, Herb, what's going on? Are you in a big hurry, or what's happening? And he said, well, when I get back, I have to meet at 5:30 or whatever with a young man who I'm going to say to him, you are the new police chief in the city of Duluth. Who was that? Gordon Ramsay. Okay? So in other words, I've known Gordon Ramsay for a long time because I met him that day when I dropped off the mayor to tell Gordon that he was going to be the new chief of police. Now you know that Gordon is recently gone, which I think is very unfortunate. But in essence, however, he was a guy who you could talk to, okay? And every once in a while, he would call me up, or more commonly, I would call him up, and we would go to lunch down at Famous Dave's, you know where that is? And we would sit there and we would talk about this and that, and then we would get around to what's happening in the community as we look at the important facets of people getting along with other people and working together to overcome problems between those groups of people. And Gordon, as you recall, those of you who knew him, smart guy. And he knew how to work in these circles. And we had a good time, not only having lunch, but going about talking about how do you do this? How do you indeed change people's thinking? And it wasn't too long before he and I and a group of other people got to speaking to other groups of people and to individuals. And do you know what? Those walls started to come down. And people started to work a little better together. And people started to say to one another, you know, this is something that we can do together, not separately, as blacks and Indians and whites and what have you, but we can do these things together. My goodness, you'd say, what a strange thing. But what an important thing. That of these people could work together to begin to bring people side by side and willing to talk to each other and willing to complain to each other. So this was another step. And I hope that the new temporary chief and whatever new chief comes on board is going to fit into that category, so that the police, an important body in many of these things, will be working together with blacks, Indians, Scandinavians, whoever, to get something done as a body, as a group of people, not separate ones, but all together. And finally, we come to an interesting step in the road. What can ACO, the reason we're here tonight, what can ACO do to help this? Every Thursday, like today, my wife goes to the doctor across the street. And she brings me over here, and I sit at a table upstairs in ACO and talk to people who are playing cards and say hello to people who are walking through. And the desk people are very kind to bring just what I need, of course. A lot of food and soda water to drink. And I sit there and talk to people and grin at the little kids, look real grumpy at them. They don't know quite what to make of all of that. But as I sit there and I look around and I see all these ACO workers never stopping their work, I have never honestly seen a bunch of people without all kinds of bosses around work so hard. And it's a pleasure to come to things here because of that. Now, isn't it important? Don't you think it's important that we all suddenly start to pull together rather than go off in our little separate cubicles? Seems to me it is. We need to, as my mother used to say, hammer some things into the ground. And so that you don't forget them. So you don't wander away from them. That's what we need to do. We need to hammer some things into the ground that are going to keep us working together to make Duluth not just a nice town and where people kind of get along, but where Duluth will set the example for people in Minnesota, in Wisconsin, and maybe ultimately in North America, for crying out loud. That here we have a place where people are pulling together, where people are trying so hard to break down the walls that once existed and are succeeding in doing so, and are looking at each other and saying, not that you're black, or not that you're Indian, or not that you're Scandinavian, or some other version of white folks, but that we are people living and working together in the city of Duluth. We are people who care about each other and who are willing to take that step that you have to take to help the person next to you. My goodness. That seems so simple, doesn't it? And yet, if you look around the world, maybe it's not. But we can do it here in Duluth because we got a good start because of it. And you take my word for it. When you come down someday and sit with me in the lobby on Thursday afternoon, you'll be surprised at how, with no boss around, the workers are hustling all the time, keeping the floor clean, putting out the food. There's going to be some kind of an event, making sure that people know where the art studio, the art place is, where they can see the wonderful artwork. I never have been, I can honestly say, in a place like ACO, where the staff and the bosses are so willing to work together to make it a reality where people are smiling and are happy. And not only is the floor clean, but their minds are. And that's so important in the day in which we live. Because around the world, if you've been reading the newspaper or watching TV, there are a lot of dirty minds trying to take over. We must not allow that to happen here in Duluth. And ACO is one of the places that you can go to observe good things, positive things happening. I thank you for your kind attention.
I'm going to turn the mic over to Michelle LeBeau. Michelle is the development director here at ACO and behind a powerful force behind all the art that you see on the walls. So, thank you.
Thank you. Before I start my presentation, I just want to thank Dr. Paulus, and I want to tell a little story because he's too modest to tell this story. Before I was ever involved with ACO, and I've been involved with ACO for many, many years, Dr. Paulus was one of the first people on the development team to develop Gimajii. And he was part of the Duluth Indian Commission and had an interest in making sure that there was not only affordable housing for Native families in Duluth, but there was also an American Indian Center where people could come and gather, and there could be feasts and all sorts of things. And I heard this story from my daughter, who was part of that team as well. And I think it's a great story because it shows his commitment. And ACO had a really hard time raising all the funds that we needed to purchase and develop this building. It cost $8 million to develop the building, and it had to come from many, many different sources. The main source of funding for affordable housing all around the state is from Minnesota Housing. And ACO had applied to them 3 times, and 3 times they were turned down for funding. And they were asking $4 million, so it was a huge part of the budget. And so Rick Smith from Minnesota Housing, who works with all of the tribes in Minnesota, And my daughter Zola Bowe and Maria Dance, who was the development director for ACO at that time, said, you know what, we need to get Dr. Paulus down there and meet with them, because he can convince them to give us that money. And so they called him and they took him in the car, and he probably liked it though, because he liked riding around with Zoe and Maria and telling them all kinds of stories. So they drove down to Minneapolis and they met with the commissioner of Minnesota Housing, and that is the highest position in that department, in the housing department. And they sat down together at a table and they went over the proposal again and talked about why it was needed. And he still was not quite convinced, and then Dr. Paulus started talking about, from his perspective, why we absolutely needed affordable housing for Indian families. They make up 30% of the homeless population in Duluth. Why we need an American Indian Center, and he was very, very eloquent from what I hear. And the two men at the end got up and shook hands, and the commissioner said, we'll be funding your project, and they did. So I always like to give credit to Dr. Paulus because, and he has stayed true throughout this whole development. Good times and bad times, he's always there for us. So thank you very much. So what I want to talk about is from a design perspective, how we took an iconic YWCA that was in very bad shape when we purchased it. We purchased it in 2006. We didn't finish raising $8 million for 5 years. We came across quite a few barriers, not just Minnesota Housing, but also getting funding from the city was very difficult. Tribal partners invested about $1.5 million, and they are still partners with us to this day. But anyway, it was quite a difficult process to try to raise that much money. And one of the things that we did is we raised money from federal and state historic tax credits so that we could renovate the building and restore it historically. And like I said, it was in pretty bad shape when we purchased it. So we are American Indian Community Housing Organization, and the building name is Gimajii Mino Ramada Zeman, and it means we are all together working towards a good life. And we finally got a sign up about a year ago. So what we did is we did historic renovations. We replaced windows and restored stairways and corridors, and we did a lot of removing old partition walls and carpets and restoring tile work and that sort of thing. But when the contractors were finished, we had a historically beautiful building, but it was a very sterile building, as you can see. Everything was painted white. There was no color. There was no nothing to really distinguish it from being a YWCA. And in those first months, or those first weeks, everybody who came in the front door would have a story about the YWCA. My mother lived here, I lived here, my kids swam here. I mean, the same is true for me, my kids swam there. So it really maintained that character of being a YWCA. So we had to think about what could we do design-wise to really reclaim this space and turn it into an American Indian Center and a home for 29 families. So we started with paint, we started with color, we started with just art on the walls. We got some photographs from In Progress that works with indigenous communities around Minnesota. We just started redesigning and reclaiming that space so that it really felt like a home. And when our families moved in, the best test to see if it felt like home was to see what the kids would do. And the kids came down into the lobby every day. Like they said, this is our living room. Our living rooms upstairs are small. This is a big living room. And so they would come down and we would have breakfast there and other lunches and things like that. Am I going backwards now? This is our board room, and actually we have a board member here, Kathy Lichterman, sitting right up front. I think that's the only board member. But anyway, we designated this a boardroom because, oh, Leanne Littlewolf is here as well, because an agency of this stature needs a boardroom. So this is home to many, many meetings. This is our gymnasium. One of the things that we did right away, because we had huge white walls, is we reached out to the community looking for muralists, and we found Laurel Sanders and Rocky Makes Room for Them. This is some of Rocky's graffiti art that you'll see all over the building. Rocky would come in and he'd have a bunch of spray paint. He's like, do you have any walls I can paint today? Yeah, go down to the gymnasium, you can paint that wall. And so he would. This is the mural that Laurel Sanders did. You see it when you first walk in Gimajii, and it really, I think, centers everybody as to where they are, who's the owner of this building, and what we're trying to accomplish. So Dr. Paulus, on our grand opening, we had over 400 people come, tribal leaders and state leaders, and many, many people came to witness the opening of Gimajii because they were so interested in what we were doing, what the apartments would look like, how we were going to operate. One of the things I'll mention is that we opened our doors in April of 2012, and we put out the word to the community in October of 2011 that we were opening. We had 400 applications by the time we opened. And to this day, we still have about 200 people on our waiting list for 29 units. I think what really changed, though, for the building was the artwork. And this is Laurel Sanders, who came in to transform a fitness room into a playroom. And these are some of the kids from our building. And I think all of them still live here. This was about 2 years ago. And they got very engaged in reading Ojibwe stories and mapping out and planning the mural. Barry Sky was a staff person, and he helped them paint the walls and design it. Rocky Makes Room for Them did a night sky. And this is the transformation. And so when our kids go down to play, they see this mural on the wall. And then this is where Rocky also did some other flowers and around the blackboard. We also have a rooftop garden because we don't have green space. So it's on the top of this building, actually, and we built Cheryl Stone, who wouldn't come up with me today. I think she's here too. Oh, there she is. Cheryl Stone, who is the building manager, caretaker, does the gardens, does the artwork, curator, everything except she does not like public speaking. But anyway, this is the kids, and Cheryl said that they were opening some manure bags and they were pretty ripe. But this is what they did. They planted the gardens, chose what plants they wanted, and we have just spectacular gardens up there. And then we have barbecues up there in the summer, and the kids can pick the vegetables and use them to help make meals. They have a lot of ownership. Again, Laurel did another mural up on the roof. All the kids got engaged with it and participated and actually drew. Some of the figures look like the kids. There's one that is very much like the image in the painting, and she spent a lot of time that summer painting. So you can see that even on the exterior of our buildings, we have murals. This is another one that's in the hallway, and another one that's on our elevator door. And as you can see, the one on the stage too is another one of Rocky's. The real start to our art, though, I think came with Ivy Vino, and she's standing back there. And I've been trying desperately to really start up the art galleries. I really am not an artist, and I have no That's not my background, so I really didn't know how to go about it. But people kept saying, talk to Ivy, talk to Ivy. But Ivy kept ignoring my friend requests on Facebook, so then one day I heard that she talked to Ken Burns or Ken Bloom, and he said, go talk to Michelle down at ACO and see about your show idea. So she came down and we met, and she had an idea to do a show featuring photographs that she had taken at powwows and powwow dancers and telling their stories. And she had written a grant for it, but the grant was several months off. And so I said, well, let's do it. Let's just try it and see if we can pull this off. So these are some of the images from her show. And they're quite amazing. And like 250 people showed up to the opening reception. And that's her son, Jake. I think that was the first show that Jake played at here. And she had an elder speak, and she had a young woman speak. And I think all of us were just blown away by that. And we realized that we were onto something really big here. So this is John Thunder's show. At the time we did Ivy's show, we didn't own this building. The Y hadn't sold it to us yet, and so in December 2012, we purchased this building. That allowed us to really expand our gallery space. This show happened because Ivy happened to text me on a Saturday and said, Jonathan Thunder's at UWS taking down his show, do you want him to come to Gimajii? And I'm like, yeah, bring him over. So that's how we got involved with John, and I think he's done several shows here. It was tough getting Karen Savage to, both her and Wendy, we kept hearing, get Wendy and Karen involved. It took us a long, long time, but now they're very involved, and she does, of course, amazing work. Steve Primo, another artist that we worked with. I love this image, and most of these pictures are Ivy's, but I go on her Facebook page and steal them. And this is so great because all the kids in the building love the artwork, and they're always coming into the galleries and walking around and asking questions and looking at them, even if they're a really hard subject, that this painting is about trafficking, and yet you can see how intent this girl is at really taking in that painting. Rabbit Strickland's show was great because not only was it a marvelous community event, but then Winona LaDuke came down to talk because she's a fan. So we had, again, Mary Billiard is a very young artist who's done some amazing work, and she's really involved too, and she actually has also organized some art groups here for young artists. She had one called Emerge with about 12 different artists. Leah Yellowbird just started painting 2 years ago, and yet her artwork is just simply amazing. Melissa Wall sent me that painting and said, can she have an art show there? And I said, sure. Called up Leah and I said, do you want to have an art show? And she said, well, that's the only painting I've ever done. So I said, well, how long do you need to put together a show? And she said, well, I don't know, give me 6 months. And so she did her show, and since then she's did about 3 more shows and is now winning prizes at different galleries. Again, it just, all the work here really brings in, like Dr. Paulus was saying, it brings in the community. This really has become a community hub for the Central Hillside especially, but really for the entire Duluth. And every time we do a show, more and more people come in that have never been in this building, and so they get to learn about it and understand what we're trying to accomplish here. Al Hunter did a performance with 5 different musicians. I love this one because this is Kathy McTavish on cello and one of our residents on hand drum, and they did a little number together at one of our shows. Jake, every time he comes in and plays, the kids in the building come and sit and listen to him and get inspired. This was a spoken word, and This was the last, Annie Humphrey did a CD release here that was really fabulous. There's music everywhere though. Even if we don't have a show, there's usually somebody playing guitar, playing hand drum, or singing, or just doing something ordinary in the lobby area. This was another art show, and a lot of our artists come to each other's show, which I really think is wonderful. And there's several artists here tonight that are at all the shows talking to each other and supporting each other. This is now a traveling show that Wendy Savage put together. Carl Baboy, who let us use this print of his and of Chief Buffalo. Very generous too. And we do an art calendar every year. 2 years we've done Ivy's photographs, and this year we did 14 of our artists. For Northrop is somebody that I just stalked on Facebook, and he's a friend of Ivy's, so she was always talking about his photography, and so I Facebooked him and said, do you want to do a show? And he's like, I'm not an artist, but if you see his photographs, you know that he is. And this actually was interesting. Slats Fairbanks, who's a longtime artist, came up and did a show here, and one of the kids who came to the show was wearing a Duluth Pack sweatshirt, and it was actually a logo that he developed years ago. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know how that slide got screwed up, but it's kind of nice. And I love this because this was a photograph that Ivy had taken, and then in walks the subjects, and they see themselves on the wall, which is really cool. That happens quite often. And this is how I'm going to end. I said to Scott, who's also, Scott's probably around someplace too. Oh, there he is. He doesn't like to be in the limelight either, but he also helps with the shows and does a lot of work in the building. And I said, I don't know how to end. There's so many amazing photographs. Like, they're endless, and they tell all these stories about how we took this building that was kind of a dilapidated YWCA, and we turned it into this incredible building that people walk into and feel like they're home. That's what I hear over and over and over again. I feel welcomed. I feel like I'm home when I come here. And for our families, it certainly is home. And this is Sunny Laddergrass, who was our front desk staff for quite a few years. Now she's a case manager, and I want her to come back to the front desk. But she, every Thursday, she would do a self-portrait of her, or a photograph of her pregnancy. And this was the last one she did before her son was delivered. And when I was thinking about the subject, home, I thought, how appropriate. This is his first home, is right there in his mother's belly. And so I guess I want to end with that and see if there's any questions, otherwise we can move on. Sorry. Jake should come up. We have one more. Yeah, will you come up from behind? So Jake Bino has a poem. Is that what you call it, a poem or spoken word?
Just have to find it on the phone. Done this beforehand. Good night, Duluth. From the needle
angels in the sky. From rain become neon, from neon to ash. Shed promises of streaks of the purest, whitest fabric. From ash to tangents paving infinite overpasses through the stratosphere. Ancestors of geometry will find you behind trembling suns and take you in palms. Ride the vibration of language in the shore. You can braid me into your synapse quilt and walk away. Good night, Duluth. As your checkered borders draw to a close, and the moons envelop marrow of desert edges, as your toes grasp cool earth floor and digital mothers fade into jars, can you feel as if metal jackdaws, abandoned and anchored to porcelain platters, stained with sins, pedaling backwards to the waterfalls, shamed into flesh and winds? Will the soles of your work boots speak something new? If you could wrap your hands around my wrist and pull my body free from these weak blue walls around your bed, would dictionaries cease fire? Can great daisies grow from cold steel? But keep steady pace and keep lockets and monkey bones. Because sometimes reason pursues lions and elephants, and beauty hides in the moldy tile cracks to cradle screams from the other underneaths. Because sometimes songs will birth stones and months and crumble on your doorstep. Because sometimes you will fall asleep at the wheel. Because sometimes the memory of your gentle, distant, dreaming breaths is all I have to scrape the windshield clean again. Good night, Duluth. 6 times I have rolled through hills and ventricles, reshaped floods and subsided the aching temples to ghosts of essence. 7 times I lay still, before judgment and before lift-off into gates of tin and longing. I fuse myself to strands and disappear between the pines or past the great wheat fields of Ohio. Find my fingertips in the light. Empty your lungs and fly with me. The motherland can sleep once again, collapsing into forever stars and pirouettes. Thank you.
And I want all of the artists who have worked in Gimajii to stand up so we can recognize you too, please. Pretty please. Come on, stand up. I see some. Ivy's already standing up. So thanks to everyone who shared their words with us this evening. Now sort of comes the interactive portion. At the tables, and there's opportunity for those that want to tour. As I said at the beginning, the flu has descended upon Ico, so do just be aware of that when you walk through, and don't, like I said, lick the walls. So Michelle, if you're interested, Michelle will take folks on a tour, and then the activity, and I did say there are prizes that you can consume. I stopped at Johnson's Bakery before I came, and then Michelle has also offered some ICO calendars. So there are tangible, awesome prizes. At your table, you'll see there are art-making implements and paper. And since the theme of this evening is home, hospitality is a big part of home. And I don't know if you guys have heard of this table making contest that people have started to have, where you set the table and there's contests to design table settings. Well, you guys are imagining that you're having Duluth coming over for dinner, and you are designing your table for Duluth. Because I don't have enough china to share with everyone, you're going to have to draw. So you're going to draw your tablecloth, your place settings. If Duluth is coming over for dinner, how would you set the table for Duluth? So if you want to get super creative and you crayons are just too constrictive for you, we also have extra fun material up here too. So it just depends on how into things you want to get. So we'll give you 20 minutes, and some folks can go on tours, some can stay and make stuff, but at the end we'll come back together, we'll present our table settings, and we'll break for the evening.